Stop eating these 5 breads right now. They're issuing recalls in 48 US states. This is Discover USA Collapse, the channel that digs into the hidden dangers behind the foods we all thought were safe. Across America, millions of families are waking up, slicing into their morning toast, or packing sandwiches for school lunches, completely unaware that the bread sitting on their kitchen counter might be under a nationwide recall. This isn't some small local bakery problem. These are household names, trusted brands that have lined grocery store shelves for decades, now being pulled from stores in nearly every state. Why? Because hidden inside those golden crusts are dangers that go far beyond a stale loaf. Federal, regulators and independent labs have flagged serious contamination risks, from dangerous bacteria that can trigger food poisoning to undeclared allergens that can send unsuspecting consumers into the ER. Even more alarming, some of these breads have tested positive for foreign materials, fragments of plastic, metal shavings, and residues from poorly cleaned industrial equipment. And yet, for weeks, many of these loaves were still being sold, eaten and fed to children, seniors, and people who trusted the brand name printed on the bag. Imagine biting into a piece of bread only to realize it's been recalled in nearly every state. And you had no idea. How many households are still spreading butter or peanut butter on slices that should have never left the factory floor? Today, we're exposing the 5 breads you need to stop eating right now, and revealing the shocking truth behind the recalls sweeping across 48 states. Because this isn't just about bread. It's about trust, negligence, and the silent threats sitting right in your pantry. Number 5. Nature's Own. For years, Nature's Own has carefully crafted its image as the healthier bread for American families. With its bold labels promising no artificial preservatives and 100% whole wheat, it has become the default brand for parents who wanted something better than cheap white sandwich loaves. Supermarkets across all 48 states dedicate entire aisles to it, and commercials show happy children running to the breakfast table with slices of natural goodness. But that carefully polished image took a devastating hit when recalls were suddenly issued for massive batches of Nature's Own bread, pulled off shelves from coast to coast after dangerous contamination reports surfaced. At first it seemed like a few isolated complaints, consumers calling in to say they found something hard and strange in their bread. But when regulators started testing, the truth became impossible to ignore. Fragments of hard plastic, jagged enough to injure, gums or teeth, and even slivers of metal that could slice into someone's throat were discovered baked directly into the loaves. Think about that. Not mold, not staleness, but industrial debris that had no business being inside something as basic as bread. And these weren't single loaves from a back alley factory. These were mass-produced, nationally distributed batches, sold in Walmart, Target, and Kroger, eaten by millions before the recall was even announced. Even worse, this isn't the first time Nature's Own has been caught in the spotlight. Over the past decade, consumer watchdogs and food safety groups have flagged the brand multiple times for undeclared allergens, mislabeled nutritional content, and repeated quality control failures. Each time, the company issued the same familiar statement about prioritizing safety. Yet behind the PR curtain, the cycle repeated itself. Trust built, trust broken, families left wondering if the food they just ate was secretly dangerous. And here's the disturbing part. When federal investigators looked into the recall, they found that many factories had outdated equipment and cleaning lapses that made contamination almost inevitable. The exact same bread that Americans have been proudly buying under the assumption of purity and wholesome tradition was being churned out in facilities that couldn't even guarantee it was free of metal shards. Imagine this: a mother toasting a slice for her 6-year-old before school, completely unaware that the loaf in her hands had already been recalled in dozens of states. Or a senior spreading butter on a piece of healthy whole wheat bread, never told that biting into it could mean an ER visit. Recalls like this don't happen because of one bad day at the factory. They happen because systemic oversight collapses. And once that happens, no slogan or marketing campaign can cover up the truth. The brand you thought you could trust has already betrayed you. If plastic and metal can slip into nature's own, what else has gone unnoticed? How many more recalls will it take before families realize that healthier bread is only as safe as the factories behind it? Number 4, Pepperidge Farm. To most Americans, the name alone feels safe, even nostalgic. A brand tied to warm kitchens, snow-covered holiday ads, and quality baked goods since the 1930s. Many seniors remember Pepperidge Farm as the bread that their parents trusted, the brand that promised artisanal quality in an industrial age. But in recent years, that trust has been tested like never before. Nationwide recalls have pulled Pepperidge Farm loaves from the shelves after federal inspectors discovered contamination risks ranging from undeclared allergens to dangerous bacterial growth. One major case revealed loaves potentially contaminated with listeria, a pathogen that poses deadly risks to seniors, pregnant women, and anyone with a compromised immune system. And the most disturbing part? By the time the recall was issued, those loaves had already been shipped across almost every U.S. state. Families had eaten them, children had taken sandwiches to school, seniors had frozen extra loaves in their freezers, completely unaware that the food they trusted could be a silent killer. Pepperidge Farm has long sold itself as the premium bread brand, a cut above mass-market competitors. But investigations into its supply chain have told a different story. Production has ballooned to meet demand, and that means cutting corners. Massive industrial bakeries churning out millions of loaves with fewer eyes on the equipment, fewer hands ensuring safety, and more reliance on automated lines that are prone to breakdowns. In one FDA report, inspectors described conveyor belts coated in residue, ovens not properly cleaned, and storage facilities where bread was exposed to conditions that could breed contamination. These are not isolated incidents. They reflect a systemic problem inside a company that leans heavily on its history and image of craftsmanship, while in reality, operating like a factory giant. Customers who once swore by Pepperidge Farm's quality have taken to social media to share frightening experiences, biting into bread that had an unusual chemical taste, finding mold days before the expiration date, or worse, suffering allergic reactions because the label failed to list potential allergens like soy or dairy. And yet, when confronted, the company's responses often sound rehearsed. Statements about investigating with the highest concern for safety, while never addressing why these failures keep happening. For a brand built on the nostalgia of trust, the recurring lapses feel like betrayal. It raises the question, when even the so-called premium bread can't be counted on, what's left? Picture a grandparent preparing a simple ham sandwich for their grandchild, reaching for Pepperidge Farm because they believe it's the safest, highest quality option, not realizing that the same bread was part of a recall stretching across 48 states. That's not a comforting image, it's a terrifying one. And it shatters the illusion that heritage brands are immune to the same problems as bargain bin bread. In today's food industry, even the brands tied to our fondest memories may be hiding serious cracks in their foundation. And the truth is, once that trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. Number 3. Wonder Bread. For almost a century, Wonder Bread has been an American icon. The brightly colored packaging, the promise of soft, enriched white bread, and the marketing campaigns that told parents this was the loaf that would build strong bodies 12 ways. Generations grew up eating Wonder Bread sandwiches in school cafeterias and at family picnics. But the reality behind the brand's cheerful image has grown darker in recent years. Recalls have exposed serious lapses, from batches tainted with mold long before their expiration dates, to reports of chemical residues linked to the industrial bleaching process used to give Wonder Bread its signature snow-white color. And the worst part is that these loaves weren't pulled from a handful of stores. They were distributed on a massive national scale, landing in pantries from California to New York before consumers even knew something was wrong. Families who thought they were buying a trusted, nostalgic staple instead ended up with a product flagged as potentially unsafe. The problems go deeper than a few bad batches. Independent food safety groups have highlighted how Wonder Bread's reliance on high-speed mass production creates vulnerabilities at every stage of the process. Mixing, proofing, and baking occur at such industrial volumes that even minor lapses in sanitation or equipment checks can spread contamination across millions of loaves in days. One leaked inspection report described flour silos caked with residue, conveyor systems clogged with old dough, and inadequate temperature controls that made mold growth far more likely. When you're producing bread at this scale, the smallest oversight multiplies into a nationwide hazard. And unlike artisan bakers who pull unsatisfactory loaves on site, massive automated systems don't stop unless a problem becomes impossible to ignore. By then, it's already too late. The bread is boxed, shipped, and stocked on store shelves. Consumers have taken notice. Online forums are filled with disturbing photos of Wonder Bread loaves spotted with mold within days of purchase, or with an odd chemical smell when the bag was first opened. Some customers described children spitting out sandwiches because the bread tasted sour, only to later learn that the product batch had been quietly recalled. For seniors, who often buy Wonder Bread out of habit or nostalgia, the risks are even greater. A weakened immune system makes something as simple as mold exposure more than an inconvenience. It can trigger dangerous infections. And for those with allergies, undeclared ingredients in mass recalls can be life-threatening. What makes this betrayal so powerful is the contrast between the brand's image and the reality. Wonder Bread isn't just bread. It's Americana, tied to baseball games, backyard barbecues, and the promise of a simpler time. Yet the recalls across 48 states prove that even the most iconic products can no longer be trusted blindly. When the very bread that once symbolized childhood innocence is being flagged by regulators as unsafe, it forces us to ask, how much of our food nostalgia is built on illusions? And how many families are still serving Wonder Bread today, not realizing that what they're feeding their kids may carry risks their grandparents never imagined? Number 2, Sara Lee. For decades, Sara Lee has marketed itself with one of the most reassuring slogans in American food history. Nobody doesn't like Sara Lee. From soft sandwich breads to buttery rolls, it has been a brand that families bought without thinking twice, a name that suggested comfort, reliability, and quality. But behind that wholesome image lies a troubling record of recalls and consumer complaints that have spread across almost every U.S. state. Federal regulators have flagged Sara Lee breads multiple times for contamination risks, including undeclared allergens that can trigger sudden and severe reactions in unsuspecting consumers. In some cases, traces of peanuts and tree nuts were detected in loaves that weren't labeled for them, a deadly mistake for anyone with allergies. And while the company issued recall notices, those loaves had already been shipped nationwide, filling store shelves from Walmart to local grocers, meaning countless families had already bought and eaten them before the danger was publicized. The problem doesn't stop with allergens. Reports of foreign material contamination have also plagued Sara Lee products. Customers across several states described finding odd, hard fragments baked into their bread, leading to FDA investigations that confirmed lapses in equipment safety and cleaning procedures at multiple facilities. In one high-profile case, pieces of hard plastic were discovered in batches distributed across more than 40 states. Imagine biting into what you believe is a soft slice of sandwich bread, only to hit something sharp enough to crack a tooth or cut your gums. For seniors or small children, that's not just unpleasant, it's dangerous. And because Sara Lee operates on such a massive scale, with industrial bakeries pumping out millions of loaves per week, even a small oversight can ripple into a nationwide hazard almost overnight. What's worse is how often these issues are brushed off as rare events. Each time, the company releases carefully worded statements about their commitment to safety. But the recalls keep repeating. Allergens, mold, foreign objects, mislabeling. Consumer advocates point out that this pattern shows not bad luck, but systemic negligence. And customers have noticed. Online reviews are filled with complaints about Sara Lee bread spoiling far too quickly, sometimes going moldy within days of purchase. Others describe unusual odors, chemical-like aftertastes, or loaves that seem underbaked despite sell-by dates suggesting freshness. These may sound like inconveniences until you consider the broader picture. A company that built its fortune on trust has failed to protect the very consumers who made it a household name. The betrayal cuts especially deep because of what Sara Lee represents. For generations, it has been tied to family gatherings, school lunches, and the idea of a dependable American kitchen. But the sweeping recalls across 48 states reveal a dangerous truth. Nostalgia can't protect you from negligence. When a brand this iconic is repeatedly caught distributing unsafe products, it forces consumers to confront an uncomfortable question. If Sara Lee isn't safe, what bread can we trust at all? Number 1. Bimbo Bakeries. Most Americans don't realize it, but the single largest bread company in the United States isn't Pepperidge Farm, Wonder, or Sara Lee. It's Bimbo. This global giant, based in Mexico and operating hundreds of plants worldwide, owns many of the very brands we've already talked about. From Entenmann's to Nature's Harvest, Arnold to Thomas's Bagels, and yes, Sara Lee itself. Bimbo controls nearly every aisle in your supermarket's bread section. That means when a recall hits Bimbo, it doesn't just affect one loaf or one brand. It can cascade through dozens of names that families across the US have trusted for generations. And that's exactly what has happened in recent years. Bimbo Bakeries has been at the center of sweeping recalls spanning 48 states, with millions of loaves pulled off shelves due to contamination fears. Reports include everything from plastic fragments baked directly into sandwich bread to undeclared allergens that could send unsuspecting consumers to the emergency room, to mold outbreaks that appeared long before expiration dates. Regulators have described these recalls as extraordinary in scale, not just because of the contamination itself, but because of how widespread the distribution network is. A single mistake in one Bimbo facility can spread across the entire country in days. Think about the sheer size of this operation. Massive industrial plants running 24/7, shipping millions of loaves per week, distributing to Walmarts, Kroger's, Targets, and local mom-and-pop stores alike. Inspectors have documented troubling lapses in oversight, conveyor belts caked with residue, packaging machines that left gaps allowing contamination, and cooling racks that weren't properly sanitized. In such enormous factories, one overlooked bolt or unclean surface can contaminate not dozens, but hundreds of thousands of loaves. And because Bimbo's brands are so interwoven into American households, a recall doesn't just pull one familiar product. It shakes the foundation of consumer trust in nearly every bread on the shelf. Families who thought they were buying different brands are stunned to learn that the same parent company produced them all, and that the same systemic problems may be behind each recall notice. Customers have voiced their outrage online, sharing images of loaves with strange colors, foul odors, and even foreign debris baked inside. Some described feeding bread to their children, only to discover after the fact that the batch had been recalled nationwide. For seniors living on fixed incomes, who often buy in bulk and freeze loaves to save money, the danger is magnified. Many are still pulling recalled bread out of their freezers weeks or months after the official notices were issued, never realizing they've been serving food flagged as unsafe. This isn't a matter of one small bakery making mistakes. This is a multinational corporation that dominates the American bread market, failing repeatedly to protect the very consumers who make it profitable. And the betrayal here cuts the deepest. Bimbo's empire is built on trust, on the assumption that the bread we buy every day, the bread we use for school lunches, hospital cafeterias, nursing home meals, is safe, consistent, and monitored. But the recalls prove otherwise. When the largest bread company in the nation repeatedly sends unsafe food into nearly every state, it raises an unavoidable question. How much control do consumers really have over what they eat? If a company this massive, with billions in revenue and endless resources, still can't guarantee clean, safe bread, what hope is there for smaller players? The truth is unsettling. The bread aisle, once a symbol of security and abundance, has become a minefield of corporate shortcuts and silent dangers. This is why these recalls matter. Because when even the biggest, richest, and most powerful bread maker in America fails to protect its customers, It isn't just a product problem, it's a collapse of trust. And that collapse is spreading across every kitchen, every school, lunchroom, and every dinner table in 48 US states. The question now isn't whether Bimbo and its brands will face another recall. It's when. And when it happens, will families even know before it's too late? Bread is supposed to be the most basic, safest food on the table. Yet these recalls prove that even the staples we trust most can hide dangerous secrets. From nostalgic icons to healthy alternatives, the loaves sitting in millions of American kitchens have been tied to contamination, allergens, mold, and industrial negligence on a scale that spans nearly every state in the country. And while companies issue carefully crafted apologies and promise to do better, the reality is clear. Systemic failures keep repeating, and consumers are left to pay the price. This isn't just about bread. It's about the collapse of oversight in the very foods we eat every day, the silent risks hidden behind familiar packaging, and the betrayal of families who thought they were buying safety and tradition. The recalls are spreading, the trust is crumbling, and the danger could already be in your pantry right now. The only question left is, after hearing all this, will you ever look at your bread the same way again?